there. And there. Okay, cool. And then we'll let some folks into the room.
I'll let you watch the chat today because I can't use my laptop like I anticipated.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good to have you here. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Great to see all your smiling faces yet again, and good to have you back. So I can still see some people are shuffling into the room here, as it were. And so I'll give it a couple, like a minute or so, and then we'll give an intro to the session and get rolling. So yeah, again, welcome everyone. Good to have you here. If you're on Facebook and YouTube, you're watching Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we'll give an intro to the session here in a moment. We've got a wonderful guest today, and I'm joined by my co-host, Morgan Cowell, who will be guiding us through this day's session, which should be pretty fun and exciting. All right, so 1 minute, and we got a couple more people. We'll get going. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to. Oh, actually, let me feature our video. So I'm going to do feature here, and we will also feature Morgan, and we will also feature our guest for today. Okay, great. Here we go. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, helping each other and creating an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that helps bring cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And for today's episode of Piano Tech Radio Hour, we have a wonderful guest, Ty Uphoff, and I'm going to hand it over to Morgan to give a little bit of intro to Ty and start kicking off the questions. So kick it over to you, Morgan.
On some of the Facebook forums, so I think a lot of people will at least know your name, but you are the owner of, it's called Vanguard Piano Service in St. Louis.
That's correct.
And you have multiple techs now, and you're kind of expanding and growing, and like you're kind of a go-getter. You're on one of the committees for regional conferences, like active within the PTG. Like you're the real deal. We've known each other for a couple of years now. We kind of help each other out with some tech questions from time to time, but then also just kind of like some business and even like life questions, right, that kind of arise. So I've gotten to know him real well from that, and I really do value his opinion. So within like a minute or two, Ty, how'd you get started in this? Catch us up.
In piano tech?
Yeah.
So quick back history is, grew up in the cornfields of Illinois and middle child of 5. And I'm about 10 years old, and riding home from school on my bike, I get smacked by a truck. And the older I get, the less I kind of believe in our concept of free will. It's like life just takes you where you're going to end up anyway. But couldn't had a cast, on my whole left leg, and couldn't really do anything that whole summer of 10 years old. And without that, I don't think I probably would ever become a piano player, but for an entire summer, I had nothing to do but play the piano. So I think that kind of led me towards that. And then being the middle child of 5, that just kind of became my thing. Piano was my thing. It was the identity thing. Hated school. Absolutely did not work at all well that environment. So already in high school, that was the plan. I was going to go work on pianos, started apprenticing with the Steinway store nearby while I was still in high school. And then lots of ins and outs of the industry. But, that was always from the beginning, the plan.
Okay, great. So it's been your whole career, really. This is what you want to do the whole time. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely done a lot of on the other side of the retail side. So after I was maybe 2 or 3 years into my apprenticeship, the manager of the store that I was working in took off and just disappeared one day. And the owner kind of looked at me and said, how do you feel about sales? And I just kind of fell into it that way. And, at whatever I was, 18 years old or whatever, I sold a Steinway B shortly after starting that. And you get the commission check for that Steinway B and you're like, maybe this whole tech business is not the way we need to be going. But so I've definitely gone in and out of retail a little bit. But service was the first, and services is where I'm most comfortable for sure.
okay, great. Well, let's hop into like dealer work. Because you wanted to mention some of the things you found, some of the experiences that you've had, and just sort of the wisdom you can offer to us. And I'd also be interested to hear sort of how the retail landscape is shifting. I know that it's kind of picked up again since COVID, but maybe the previous 5 to 10 years was kind of a decline. Maybe if you have any insights about that within your own
right.
Your own
So
area.
the dealers that I talked to, they were all doom and gloom, right, when COVID first was coming around, which is understandable. None of us knew what this was, what it was going to look like for us. And I think that's panned out, that people being stuck at home, people not being able to travel, people not being able to go out to eat, they're investing into their homes and they got to have something to do. So, we kind of fit the bill perfectly, right? I think we've created a lot of piano players in the last 2 years that we wouldn't have had without this, horrible pandemic that we've been dealing with. So I think sales have been strong, honestly, from what I've seen. And the biggest problem they're dealing with is just like any industry, the supply, right? I think a lot of dealers are still struggling to stock the stores.
So let's work backwards then. What would be some tips, some do's and don'ts with working with dealers? Because
Right.
dealers aren't always technicians. Oftentimes they're not technicians.
Correct.
And sometimes you want to do more than they're willing to pay for. So
Right.
how do you kind of bridge that gap while still sleeping at night,
Right. I think the first step is to just kind of acknowledge their importance in this community, right? We don't exist if people aren't selling pianos, right? So if the retailers aren't out there selling pianos, then the rest of this doesn't happen. So I think having some appreciation for what they're doing, it's a hard job, and kind of starting from there. And I think to understand that from my time selling pianos and from knowing lots of people who sell pianos, most of them do not like seeing us come through the door, and that's a problem. Most of us, they see a technician coming in and, oh my gosh, what is this guy going to say? What's this guy going to do? So trying to be more of an ally rather than, coming in as a combatant, to help them do their job. For instance, if you get warranty tunings from a dealer, I think the biggest mistake techs make is they just talk too much. They say more than needs to be said, and clients don't understand what we understand. So we speak and we say things and we think that we're communicating, the reality of the situation, but that's not what they hear. So maybe an example, you take a used piano sale from a retailer and, it's got excessive lost motion, right? This is a 15-minute fix. You can text the dealer right while you're there tuning the piano. Hey, it's got this problem. What would you like me to do? Would you like me to go and fix it? This is the price, whatever, and just fix it. But when you talk to the customer, you say, well, this says, excessive lost motion, but it's not a big deal. We can definitely do something about this. Customer didn't hear that. Customer heard, this dealer sold me a lemon. It's a broken piano, and and they don't understand what we're saying. So just taking, kind of covering for the dealer, I think, is on minimal stuff, and just, take care of the situation.
Okay. A struggle that I have with some of my local dealers is that they sell the really great stuff, then they also sell the really low end stuff that I really don't recommend going to someone's home, especially when it's a church or it's like a girling musician or something like that. So
Right.
I have a hard time like keeping my mouth shut about those sort of things, but I know that you have to have the economy of pianos, right, to make it work. Like, you have to be able to serve the whole market, but that's a hard one for me.
Correct.
So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that I want to be a defender of. Is I want to be a defender of the terrible pianos. And what I mean by that, what I grew up on was something, that I would go online and make fun of if I ran into it today, as a piano tech. It was a terrible, no name, spin it, it was an awful piano. In fact, when I was working that first summer at that Steinway dealership, I started working on Chopin Opus, that thing, and I never got really good at it. I'm not that great of a player, but I had it down enough, and I was kind of working on it in secret, right? I wanted to surprise my mother and be like, "No, look at this piece I play." And after I got it down at the store where I could kind of fake my way through it, I go home and I play it on this piano, and it wouldn't happen. I mean, the piano was not capable of performing to that level. But the defense of the bad piano is, with, in no reality ever were my parents going to own a tier 1 piano. I mean, that just wasn't ever going to happen. So that's out of the cards. And that terrible piano that I grew up on, where I learned to love this instrument and love this craft, without that piano, the SK2 behind me doesn't exist, right? We never get to this point, so when a dealer sells something and it's a $500,000, $1,500 piano, if you're selling something for $1,500, it's not a good piano. I can guarantee you, so that doesn't mean it doesn't serve its purpose. It doesn't mean that they can't afford anything else, right? So if that's all they can afford, then I think we do what we can to make that the best piano that it can be for them. So what I would say is, and you can maybe chime in on this, on what you think the percentages are. I would guess that about 60% of technicians run technicians, right? It's tune the piano, get your check, get out the door. 10% or 5%, the techs who work on concert instruments, who do rebuilding, who do, very high end work. And that's that. My comfort zone is in the middle there. It doesn't take a great tech to me, to take a CFX or a D or a, and make that a beautiful instrument. It was already a beautiful instrument. What I want to see is that 20-year-old Wurlitzer Spinet in grandma's basement that nobody's tuned, in decades. What can you do with that? And can you make that, something that people can enjoy and play? So I think there's a space for taking these run-of-the-mill pianos and doing more than just tuning and kind of fixing them up.
That's an interesting perspective, Ty, and I appreciate you sharing it. And it's interesting, that kind of potential clash of perspectives. They both seem to have their sort of good sides, right? Like, if we could all just work on Steinway Ds, and that would be awesome. And that's all anybody ever wanted or had. And there are those techs. I remember I've heard several stories of that tech that decides one day they're only going to work on grand pianos from now on, right? And that's like a pivotal moment in their career where they just start to like pick everything up. You made me think of people. I've literally met probably 2 or 3 people who told me that when they were a kid, they had a piece of cardboard with a piano keyboard drawn on it,
Right.
And that was their piano. And so, you're not going to tell somebody, hey, throw away that piece of crap. You got to get something better. It's like you said, work with what you have. And it is impressive, and it does often get overlooked, that technician that can take a piece of junk and, at least bring it somewhere special, at least somewhere more special than the people thought it could be,
Right. And I think that's where a lot of my business is grown. Is I think a lot of technicians, they're kind of this Captain Ahab out here. You know, they want to land this whale of a deal. You know, they want to rebuild for 40 grand, or they get this rebuild, this regulation job, and they want to do it. And what I found is when you're out tuning pianos, right? Maybe the majority of them are operating at like 40% of their potential. In one day, I can take a 40% and turn it into an 80%, right? And the truth is 99% of my clients probably wouldn't notice the difference between 80% to 90% to 100%, right? So in one day, taking that piano and really kind of turning it around, making it a much better instrument without breaking their budget, without breaking their bank, I think gives them the most value what we're able to do. And in fact, that was kind of my business. That was my business model before we expanded. We now have a shop space. We have other techs, and we're doing more of that repair types work. What I did was I kind of said, you know what? If I can't do it in one day in the customer's home, I don't want to do it. I'd rather farm that out. Send those key tops off. Send that restringing job out. If I can't do it in one day in the client's home, I don't want to do it, because the truth is, just from financial perspective, as soon as you start taking work back to the shop, your pay probably went down. You probably started making less money. So seeing more people and making as much impact and as much good as I can do right there and then, that's kind of the focal point of how I do business.
That's really interesting. A lot of us have to do the full spectrum of service, right? Like we might do a spin it like in the morning, and then in the afternoon, like as a concert tuning.
Right.
So sometimes it's easy to get in that kind of elitist mindset where, all the instruments have to be at this very high level to function.
Right.
And you're right. There is that balance point. I would push back slightly though, and talk about like sports equipment. If you get a really good kid that plays tennis and you give him a $5 racket versus a $500 racket, like his performance will get better, right, and he will be, a better player when he gets out of high school because of that upgrade. So it's walking that line with your customers, with your clients. And I'm always honest with them. I say that we can make this better, but this was built for this level of playing, and right now it's like this percentage, like of what it could be. I like that mentality.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that, because I do think there's the other end of that pendulum swing, right, where we've all walked into a client who tells us, the last guy said this was a one of a kind instrument or whatever, and it's just some piece of crap, But I think some technicians think the more they talk up a piano, like the more likely they are to get the repeat business, I guess. I don't know where that comes from. But I think there is definitely the other side of that, where if the player deserves better and can do better on a better instrument, we do need to be the ones to say, hey, you deserve a better piano. I'm going to shut my door real quick, try to block out some of this.
Yeah, we had maybe we should bring on like a second guest. It sounds like we've got some other people with some beings with interesting opinions to share on the topics at hand.
Well, we're piano technicians, so it's time for the lawns to be mowed next door. So.
Oh yeah, actually, we can't hear that too badly. I know there's the Instagram. I think she calls herself the Underdog Piano Service, and that's like all of her Instagram photos or the dog, laying under the piano, or they're a very integral part of some of our lives.
But she's up in Maine, actually. Yeah, she's great. I'm blanking on her name. Went to North Bennett, but anyways.
No, the dogs are honestly probably the best part of the job. I love seeing all the dogs along the way as we tune pianos.
So let's just dive into this topic a little bit deeper, because I know personally I can think of exactly a very specific situation where he was a guy, he was a pretty loyal client, piano tuning wise. It was his livelihood to pianos. He taught piano. He had a piano school of other people teaching piano, under his guidance. And he continued to maintain this relatively mediocre small upright piano that just really could have been a ton better. And I really actually remember, I'm sure part of it was my salesmanship, but I remember having like a deep conversation with this guy and saying, hey man, like it's time to upgrade, right?
Right.
Like it's time to
You can
upgrade.
do better.
You could do better. You deserve it. It'll, if you don't think you have the funds, go for it anyways. It's going to take you to the next level. There's all these ways in which I was, putting it at him. And I'll be honest, like we were close enough and we knew each other well enough. And he said, yeah, man, I know my wife would kill me. I've got some credit card debt. Like, it was I could feel how tough of a decision that was for that guy, even though it was such a, it was a business expense. It was a piece of his livelihood. Like it made so much sense from an outside perspective, but it was some sort of block he had. I even tried to come up with a way where it would get paid for, right? You know what I mean? Like there was like some sort of, I was going to try to convince him to raise his prices for his students. I said like, well, how much do you have to raise your prices for your students? You'll get that much more income. You won't have to go into credit card debt. You'll have enough money and then you're going to be able to do this. But it's still, even though we had that plan, he wasn't ready for that. So I'm just curious if we have anything to say about those. Like how much do we sell it? How much is it the person's they're going to switch when they switch and we don't have a control over it? And how much of it is our responsibility? Like, what would you guys do in that situation? Would you push harder or you say, okay, he's not ready?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up with an industry professional, right? Because that seems to be sometimes the ones who don't do anything to improve their situation with their piano, right? They're the ones that won't spend any money to get it regularly, get it voiced, get it fixed up, or improve, or just replace it with a better instrument. Yeah, I don't know what that disconnect is there with industry professionals, where sometimes they really do work on are live in just terrible instruments. But I think,
well, let's be honest, music is not the most lucrative career.
Right.
That's part of it.
Right. No, no one's in this industry to get rich. No, we're doing what we can with what we have. But I think you just offer the options, right? You just present the options like you did,
right.
Hey, this to your piano to get it to where it could be, or really what you should be doing is upgrading and getting a better instrument.
What about you, Morgan? Do you think you could have sold him on it? Like maybe there's a different perspective to take?
I have done this many times and I have a lot that are in the works, but it's a 2 to 3 year process sometimes. So, because one, you have to disillusion them that their piano is not getting more valuable. Unlike a violin or certain guitars, right? It's actually going down in quality and in value. So that's the first hurdle, which might take a few months for them to kind of get their head around, for their grandma's piano is, like will someday have a negative value to it rather than being priceless to them. But two, it's very important to have the solution for them. And so like if you have a used piano at your shop, like you ask them, like, why don't you swing by sometime and why don't you try the piano out and see what you think? Or you might say, hey, this dealer down the street is really cool. I'm going to send him a text and, let him know that you're coming. And then what you do is you text that dealer and you say, hey, this guy's coming in. It's like his